It's time to stack the Buffalo Bills 2022 NFL Draft Board today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Monday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, or if you're joining us on the YouTube channel, your first watch every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. I've been looking forward to doing this episode for a while. We're going to stack the Buffalo Bills 2022 NFL Draft Board, and I am approaching this just like I did last year, where if Brandon Beane asked me to submit him a draft board that he would use for the draft, and he was going to peel off the names one by one, and the one that's highest remaining on the board when the Bills are on the clock would be the player they would pick, this is what I would submit. And last year, if you guys recall, it was the first time I'd ever done this, which blows my mind because I've been doing NFL draft work in a published capacity since 2013. And even before that, I did my own, personal draft work dating 10 years probably before that. So putting this Bills twist on it has been really fun over the last couple of seasons. And so today I'm going to give you my personal draft board that I would use for the Buffalo Bills in the 2022 NFL Draft. Now, I have a couple of disclaimers that I want to put out there because this is important. First of all, what makes this very difficult for me, that is not difficult for Brandon Beane, is Brandon Beane has a plan for Jordan Poyer. He has a plan for Tremaine Edmonds. He has a plan for the cornerback 2 position, and I don't know what they are. And so I just kind of had to weave those things into this. I'm kind of thinking a little bit about having to replace Jordan Poyer, thinking a little bit about having to replace Tremaine Edmonds, thinking a little bit about there being another veteran cornerback on this roster that can start games. But I don't know definitively what those answers are, and so that makes this a little bit more challenging of an exercise. So I had to keep that in mind while I was stacking this board. The other thing I want to say is that this is Bills specific. This is not in a vacuum. And so when you look at my draft board on the draftnetwork.com, it's going to look extremely different than this because the way I view players through the lens of each individual team is different than just in a vacuum. All right. So just keep that in mind. And then the last thing I'll say is that I pushed up players at positions of need. And you guys know that I think the primary positions of need for the Bills are corner, interior offensive line, wide receiver, and running back. And so with that in mind, I put an emphasis on players at those positions and kind of force them up the board a little bit because I think that's important. You want to use your resources in the draft to help yourself build the best possible football team. And so that does take into account need. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to go 1 through 80. That's right. I stacked 80 players on this board. That way I can capture first round options, second round options, third round options. These are all players that I think would realistically be a good selection in the first, second, and third round. And so this will be a great resource for us the rest of the draft season. And then, of course, on draft day, as we navigate that process as viewers and some of us as analysts. The other thing that I'll say is that I don't have any quarterbacks ranked. So that's good news because I'm going to give you 80 players that don't include quarterbacks. And there's going to be, I would guess within the first 80 picks, I would think 6 quarterbacks get drafted. I think 3 quarterbacks get drafted in the first round. I would say definitely 2 get drafted before the Bills pick at 25. But I'm not stacking any quarterbacks. The Bills don't need one of those. All right, let's do this thing. We'll do segment 1 will be first round. Segment 2 will be second round. Segment 3 will be third round. And then I have 3 players that I couldn't stack them in here. I just had a hard time with them. They're good players, but I just don't think they fit with the Bills. And so we'll get to them at the very end. So again, one player at a time, the order I would pick them if the Bills were on the board. If the Bills are picking number 1 overall, this would be my pick, right? And then so on and so forth. And a lot of these players we've discussed at length over the last several weeks on the podcast. So I'm not going to sit here and break down Sauce Gardner and Jameson Williams again, right? I've said all I could say about those players. So we'll move quickly through the players we've covered a lot, and I'll add a few comments on players that maybe we haven't touched on as much. So number 1 for me, this is the best player in the class, in my opinion. It's Aidan Hutchinson, edge defender out of Michigan. I think he is everything that you're looking for in a college prospect in terms of resume, the way he's wired, the way he translates to the NFL. He's a technician with explosive athleticism that just understands the nuances of playing the position. I think he's the best prospect in this draft, and so I had to put him at number 1 on my Bills-specific board. Now, number 2, Sauce Gardner, cornerback out of Cincinnati. You guys know exactly what I think about Sauce. You know exactly what I think about the need at cornerback. If the Bills had the number 2 pick in the draft and Aidan Hutchinson was drafted, I would want them to pick Sauce Gardner out of Cincinnati. At number 3, another very familiar name, Jameson Williams, Alabama wide receiver. I think he is special. I think he is absolutely a special prospect, one that is everything the Bills need at wide receiver in terms of a vertical threat, a yards after catch threat. He's going to improve your spacing. He's going to lift coverage for the likes of Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs and Dawson Knox and Jamison Crowder. He is exactly what this offense needs. He was my number 3 prospect on the board for the Buffalo Bills. At number 4, Kyle Hamilton, safety out of Notre Dame. This would be a fun player in my mind for the Bills to add. I think they can become so much more dynamic in their sub packages with Kyle Hamilton. He can play kind of as a hybrid slot safety linebacker type player. You could just get him on the field. He's going to help take away matchup problems that offenses present to you. He gives you a future Jordan Poyer replacement. You can use him as a linebacker and play him closer to the line of scrimmage against teams that want to run the football, like pretty much every team the Bills are going to face this year. And every team wants to run the football when they face the Bills because they have Josh Allen. And the best way you can keep Josh Allen on the off the field is by being able to run the football and sustain drives. I think this is the exact type of neutralizer that your defense needs. At number 5, cornerback Andrew Booth out of Clemson. I love everything about Andrew Booth as a player. I will admit that there is a level of concern that I have over the medicals there with his double hernia surgery. Some guys come back from that perfectly fine. Other players are like Colby Listenby, and you just they never nothing ever happens. They can't play through it. So I don't have that medical information, but it gives me some level of concern. If your doctors clear him, I'd pick him high. Love him. Number 6, Ikemi Kwan, NC State offensive tackle. I don't view offensive tackle as a major need for the Buffalo Bills. I think they have their bookend starters in Dawkins and Brown locked in. But I think just there's going to be some players that are just so talented that I have to have them on the board. And if Ikemi Kwan fell to the Bills, you'd have to pick him. And I think he could play guard. But I think this is kind of a silly conversation. Ikemi Kwan's not going to be a Buffalo Bill. And some other team's going to pick him and be really happy with him as their left tackle. At number 7, I have Evan Neal, offensive tackle out of Alabama. Same type of thing, as I said, with Ikemi Kwan. There's not a real clear path to him being a Buffalo Bill or to him being in the range, right, or getting on the field. It would just be a weird player for the Bills to pick. But the talent there, that we're talking about one of the best 5 players in the draft. At number 8, Derek Stingley Jr., cornerback out of LSU. I think he checks every box you're looking for as a corner. Obviously, you wish the last couple of seasons were better, but 2019 Derek Stingley is the best corner in this draft. But it's been a couple of years since we've seen that. I think there's a lot of circumstances that played into it, but he's very high on my list of players I'd love to see the Bills draft. At number 9, Chris Olave, Ohio State wide receiver. I think he's the second best vertical receiver in this class behind Jameson Williams. Really dynamic route runner, really dynamic hands. I think he'd be the field stretcher the Bills were looking for. You wish he gave you a little bit more after the catch. Number 10, Trayvon Walker, edge from Georgia. If you asked a machine to build you an NFL defensive end, it would spit out Trayvon Walker in terms of measurables. Unbelievably explosive and powerful. He has a bright future in the NFL. Number 11, Kayvon Thibodeau, edge player from Oregon. Again, probably, a lot of these players, Trayvon Walker, Aidan Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau, those are not going to be Bills. They're going to go early in the draft. The Bills aren't going to trade up for them. The Bills don't even really have a need at those positions. But we got to stack them all because as we talk about pick 25, these names come off the board. And so you have to stack 25 players that you like. That's just kind of how this exercise goes. But Kayvon Thibodeau, dynamic edge rushing presence that I think's a really good run defender as well. He's going to make some team happy, maybe the New York Jets. Number 12, Jermaine Johnson, edge player, Florida State. I think he is as balanced of a football player as you're going to find in terms of run defense and pass rush ability. He's a technician. He's long, athletic, powerful. He's a stud, should go in the top 10 picks. Number 13, Garrett Wilson, Ohio State wide receiver. He's a player that I think would make a lot of sense for the Bills. Good yards after catch, good route runner, good hands. I worry about him being a true outside player. I think he's more of a slot, but that's okay. I think that the Bills could use a player just like Garrett Wilson that gives them a lot more after the catch than they've had, in Cole Beasley. So Garrett Wilson, if somehow he's there at 25, pull the trigger. Number 14, Daxton Hill, defensive back out of Michigan. We've talked about him a ton on this podcast. I think he can play outside corner. I think he can be a versatile DB that can play in deep alignments as a safety. I think he can play in the slot. I think he can do anything you're looking for in your secondary, and I wouldn't bat an eye if the Bills picked him at 25. I think he's a really, really good football player. At number 15, Devonta Wyatt, defensive tackle out of Georgia. I don't view defensive tackle as a major need for the Bills. They've got a lot of guys locked up at that position, but Devonta Wyatt, I think, is a special prospect in terms of his ability to penetrate, his athleticism, his pass rushing ability. He's one of those guys, if he's there at 25, I think you just pick him because he's the best player on the board, and it's a type of talent that you just don't pass on. 16, Jahan Dotson, Penn State wide receiver. I think he's Emmanuel Sanders 2.0, stud. A little bit small, but the best hands in this class. Trent McDuffie comes in at number 17, Washington cornerback. Talked a lot about him. You wish he had longer arms, but he checks every other box in terms of man coverage, press coverage, zone coverage. He's a student of the game. He tackles. He has ball skills. He has everything. Number 18, Kyler Gordon out of Washington. He's longer than Trent McDuffie, and I think he's pretty good in man coverage. He's physical. I love his temperament. I have some questions about his ability in zone, but, if you could play man, that's very helpful. I just think he's got to dial in on those zone instincts. Number 19, Zion Johnson, guard from Boston College. We've talked about him a ton. Number 20, Kenyon Green, Texas A&M guard. Number 21, Cair Elam, Florida cornerback. I wish he played the run better, but he's a very physical player in coverage. He's very good ball skills. He's got some of the best ball skills in this class, and I think he'd be outstanding in zone. And so I don't love him as an off-man corner, but I think in the Bills scheme, he could really play well for himself, but I just wish he was a better run defender and tackler. Number 22, Devin Lloyd, linebacker out of Utah. If you're really looking for a Tremaine Edmonds replacement, it's Devin Lloyd. I think he's the best linebacker in the class, good in coverage, and good physical tackler. I think he's a DeMario Davis clone. Number 23, Trevor Penning, Northern Iowa, offensive tackle. Again, I don't think offensive tackle is a major need for the Bills. Maybe he has some upside at guard, but he's one of those talents that if for some reason he slips to where you are, I think you have to think about picking him just because of the talent alone there. He's got incredible size, athleticism, and power. Number 24, Tyler Smith, guard, tackle, combo player. I think he's probably best suited to play guard in the NFL. Out of Tulsa, talked a lot about him, the most tenacious football player I've ever seen. Needs a lot of technical work, but I think he could be a very natural player to sub in for Roger Saffold after this season, who I think is more of a one-year thing. So there you have it. Those are my first-round guys in order 1 through 24. I do think at least 2 quarterbacks get drafted before pick 25. So if the Bills sit there at 25, they are going to be able to pick one of those players. And so peel the names off one at a time. Pick the one that's highest left on draft day. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. So let's move on to second round targets. And the first chunk of the second round targets is very much no man's land. These are players that I just feel like are not in striking distance for the Bills, but if they were to like trade back, it would make a lot of sense. Like, I'd have questions about him at 25, but if the Bills moved back and then picked them, or if like they fell to them in the second round, I'd love it. So this chunk here is very much that. So at number 26, Christian Watson, wide receiver, North Dakota State. Talked a lot about him. He's a height, weight, speed guy. Very, very explosive football player. I think that he's one of those guys that he's a bit raw, but if you pass on him, you got to be a little bit nervous that he becomes a superstar in the NFL, because he's been such a big play machine at North Dakota State. Number 27, Tariq Wallen, cornerback, UTSA. I've talked all about him. Converted wide receiver, raw, but unbelievable traits. Good football character. Number 28, Jaquan Brisker, Penn State safety. I think he's a very natural Jordan Poyer replacement. My comp for him is Jordan Poyer. I think he'd be perfect in that role. He tackles. He has ball skills. He's versatile. Number 29, Lewis Seen, Georgia safety. He is a hammer playing downhill. Really, really physical, aggressive football player. You wish he made a few more plays in the ball, but he's got great speed. He's got great range. And I think that the plays on the ball will come because he does have such an aggressive mentality, and he's so explosive in terms of athleticism. Number 30, Skye Moore out of Western Michigan. Kind of a slot type player, tough over the middle. You wish he was a little bit more dynamic in terms of vertical receiving, but I think he's a very natural slot option for the Bills. Number 31, Boye Mafe, Minnesota edge. Unbelievable traits there. He's a bet on traits guy, a little bit underdeveloped, but he's got length. He's got explosiveness. He's got some really impressive flashes. I thought he was awesome at the Senior Bowl. George Karloftis, number 32, Purdue edge. He is a power compression style player, modest length. You wish he was a little bit more flexible, but this guy can really challenge the width of the pocket, and he's got a hot motor, and he's really explosive in terms of linear athleticism. Number 33, Tyler Linderbaum, Iowa center. I don't think he has position flexibility. I think he's a center only, which is very complicated because the Bills have Mitch Morse, and they have him locked up for a couple more seasons. But he's, like I said, this is kind of no man's land, where it's just players that are really good. You kind of have a hard time projecting them to the Bills, but you kind of have to talk about it. Number 34, Charles Cross, Mississippi State offensive tackle. Again, a tackle only. I don't know what the course for him to be on the Bills is, both from a draft positioning perspective and, what you do if you were to draft him, but he's a good football player that I had to list. David Ajabo, Michigan edge. He's a really good football player. Unfortunately, just suffered an Achilles injury, but only played football for 5 years, and he's really advanced for a player that's still new to the game. I think he's got a bright future, but he's going to have to take a redshirt year most likely in 2022. Nakobe Dean, Georgia linebacker, talked about him last week on the podcast. You wish he was a little bigger. You really kind of question, what is this guy going to look like outside of the structure of that Georgia defense? We had a staff meeting recently at the Draft Network where somebody said, look, with Nakobe Dean, if he played at Wyoming, what would you think of him as a prospect? And so that kind of complicates things. He's a good football player at Georgia, but it's a really good scenario to be a good football player, and he's a small guy. So it's something to be mindful of. All right, now we're out of no man's land. I thought that was no man's land. That 26 to 36, that 10-player buffer there is just like, I like these players. I don't love them for the Bills. They would be weird at 25, more palatable if you drop back a little bit. Just kind of a strange bucket of players. Now we're kind of back into the, all right, I think these players are definitely in play. They're at positions of need, that type of thing. So number 37, Chad Mumma, Wyoming linebacker. We've talked about him. I think he's a really dynamic processor, plays through contact. He tackles well. He's got good coverage range. He's an instinctive football player. I think he'd be a great second-round pick. Number 38, Dylan Parham, Memphis guard. I think he's a very natural projection to the Bills' offensive line to step in for Roger Saffold after this season. Number 39, RB1, Isaiah Spiller, Texas A&M. Best combination of vision and contact balance in this class. He's good in pass pro. He catches the ball, at least at a very functional level. I don't think he's like a super dynamic route runner or those types of things, but he knows how to navigate tight quarters. He knows how to press the line of scrimmage. He knows how to manipulate the second level. He is a stud running back. He'd be the one I'd want the Bills to pick if they did in the second round. Number 40, another running back, Kenneth Walker, the third out of Michigan State. He's a more explosive version of Isaiah Spiller, but worse on passing downs. That's the thing about Kenneth Walker. Just doesn't show much right now at this point as a pass blocker or a receiver, but arguably the best pure runner in the class, and he's got great speed. Number 41, Cam Taylor-Britt out of Nebraska, cornerback. I think he's just a perfect projection to the Bills as an outside corner. Physical, ball skills, super competitive, high football character. I think he'd be a slam dunk. 42, Alante Taylor, Tennessee, another corner. I think he's very similar in a lot of ways to Cam Taylor-Britt in terms of size, athleticism, physicality, ball skills. I think he'd be a great second-round pick for the Bills. Travis Jones, number 43, UConn defensive tackle. Think Jordan Davis without the weight management issues and conditioning issues and better pass rusher. Number 44, Jordan Davis, Georgia defensive tackle. We've talked enough about him on this podcast. Number 45, Calvin Austin III out of Memphis, wide receiver. We've talked about him a ton, 5'7", 170 pounds, but he's a really good route runner, good hands, punt returner, can do all the Isaiah McKenzie horizontal jet sweep stuff, but he's a better route runner with better hands. Number 46, Bernard Raymond, Central Michigan. I think he's a guard. He'll have to kick inside from guard because he played left tackle at Central Michigan, but I think he's got some Andy Levitre to him at that position. Number 47, John Mechie III, wide receiver, Alabama. Really good route runner, really good after the catch, really good vertical ability. Has some variance to the catch point. He's not good in contested situations, but I think he's a really solid day two wide receiver that if he finds more consistency at the catch point, I think he can be a steal. Number 48, Brian Robinson, Alabama running back. Talked about him when we did the running back primer, and I keep going back to him because I feel like this is the guy that you draft him. He takes all the short yardage stuff away from Josh Allen, but he also makes you pay if you're a defense and you choose to go too high safeties against the Bills because this guy is going to eat up your light boxes. Really good player out of Alabama. Number 49, Breece Hall, running back, Iowa State. Explosive, great vision in space, really high upside as a pass catcher. I just question the contact balance, and I question his first level vision, right? I don't think he's a very nuanced player in terms of pressing the line of scrimmage, but once he gets through the hole, this guy's really dynamic, really good pass catching upside. Number 50, George Pickens, wide receiver, Georgia. I'd be surprised if he was on the Bills' radar just based on some things I know about George Pickens, but I think he gives you some really exciting vertical receiving ability, and you guys know that I want that for the Bills. Number 51, Treylon Burks, wide receiver, Arkansas. If the Bills were looking for a dump and run type player to get the ball to and ask to create after the catch, give him some chances to win down the field, can use him in a variety of alignments. He's just got a lot of work. He's got to grow so much as a route runner. I mean, just watch a tape, pop on the Arkansas tape and show me the plays where he wins routes. He's just not there. He's got a lot of work ahead of him in that department, but I think you can find value out of Treylon Burks as like an X factor for your offense. Number 52, Arnold Ebiketie, Penn State edge. He probably goes late first round or very early second round. I don't know that he's really going to be in play for the Bills. really solid player, very, very good speed to power conversion, explosive first step. He's a really good edge player. I just don't know if the Bills really have a need for him, but I like him. 53, Perion Winfrey, defensive tackle out of Oklahoma, penetration style player. He'll have a transition. He's a lot like Ed Oliver in terms of he played over the center in an odd front defense in college, and now he's going to be a penetration style player in the NFL. Got a little taste of what that could look like at the Senior Bowl, where he was awesome. He's the MVP of the game. High energy guy, high football character. Interesting talent. You'd have to think about him if he was there at 57 and there wasn't, the players ahead of him on the board still available. Number 54, Quay Walker out of Georgia. He's more of a Matt Milano replacement than a Tremaine Edmonds replacement, which gives me a lot of questions about that. But he is a height, weight, speed guy, physical, aggressive player that has a high ceiling as a linebacker in the NFL. 55, Leo Chenal, Wisconsin linebacker. Really good processor, really, really good downhill player, physical tackler, good in short areas, like in terms of like shallow zone drops. I wouldn't trust him with much in terms of range and coverage. But if you're looking for a Sam backer and you're really going to play more 3 linebacker stuff, this is a player you have to consider. So there you have it. There's my second round options. So we've been through 55 players already. And hopefully the Bills get 2 of those players, right, with their first 2 picks in the draft, assuming they pick at 25 and 57. We talk about Built Bars all the time, the world's best tasting protein bars, but have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, then you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy. They're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar. They're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate because all Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and they're healthy for you. They're low calorie, they're low sugar, they're low carb, and they're high in protein. So many great flavors: mint brownie, coconut, raspberry, coconut almond. New flavors coming out all the time, so check out Built.com often. And at Built, it's all about taste. They make it taste great first, then they figure out how to make it healthy, and I don't know how they do it, but they pull it off every single time. Got a deal for you? Go to Built.com. Use our promo code LOCKED15. You'll get a 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, let's get to the third round options. Let's keep this thing moving. Number 56, Troy Anderson, Montana State linebacker. He is a fun player. We've talked about him a lot. He's got unbelievable versatility. He played quarterback, running back, was all conference for Montana State. Then he went to linebacker, was all conference there, and a conference player of the year in terms of defense. Height, weight, speed guy, physical, good tackler. Has to figure out the processing side of things. You can tell he's new to playing linebacker, but he's a really good risk to take in my mind, because I think at a minimum, you have an elite special teamer. You have a guy that can play in sub. You have a guy that can help you on offense a little bit as kind of like a Taysom Hill type player. So I think there's just a lot you can do with him. Josh Williams at 57, corner, Fayetteville State, height, weight, speed guy, length, physical. I think he's got some real developmental appeal as a third-round pick at corner. 58, Alec Pierce, Cincinnati wide receiver, another height, weight, speed guy, good vertical receiving ability. He'll have to work on his release package a little bit, but if you want size and ball skills down the field, Pierce gives you that. 59, Luke Godecki, Central Michigan guard. Very similar to what I said about Bernard Raymond. Has some Andy Levitre to him. Think he'd be a good fit in the zone rushing offense at guard. Number 60, Isaiah Likely, Coastal Carolina tight end. I think he's a really exciting big play threat at tight end that can, win down the seam, can create after the catch. And the Bills don't have any tight ends signed beyond this season. So they may want to look ahead at having a cost control player on a rookie deal for the next 4 seasons by drafting one at some point in this draft. Number 61, David Bell, Purdue wide receiver. You're not going to love his athleticism, but you will love his route running and ability to catch the football. Great route runner, great hands. I think he's going to be a very solid top 3 option for a productive NFL passing offense. Number 62, Trey McBride, Colorado State. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Tight end. I think he's the second best tight end in this class. Very solid across the board player. Great hands. Super competitive. He's not very elusive in terms of route running and yards after catch, but he's physical. He catches everything. and that first guy never gets him on the ground. He knows how to break tackles. 63, Sean Ryan, UCLA, offensive lineman. I think he can be a guard for the Bills. He's a technician. He's powerful, modest athlete, but I think he's starting upside as a guard in the NFL. Number 64, Khalil Shakir, Boise State, wide receiver. Has inside-outside ability, high football character guy, great ball skills, super competitive, should help you on special teams. 65, Ed Ingram, LSU, guard. I think he's a starting caliber prospect that can be a really solid player for you. I'm surprised because he's a bigger guard that's actually a better pass blocker than he is run blocker, and I think he's got a high ceiling to kind of develop into a more consistent run blocker. 66, Jalen Tolbert out of South Alabama. He's a wide receiver. I think he's a really good 3-level threat. Love his ability to win vertically and stack corners and get behind them. I think he'd be a great developmental wide receiver for the Bills offense. Number 67, Brian Asamoah, linebacker, Oklahoma. He's a fun player. I think he's got a lot of range, a lot of coverage ability. He's super physical. He's a lot like Jerome Baker from the Miami Dolphins. 68, James Cook, running back, Georgia. This guy's an unbelievable pass catcher. You can play him legitimately as a slot wide receiver. He can run routes. He has ball skills down the field. He's got the ability to kind of press wide runs. And he's a very versatile back that the Bills could target. Number 69, Cole Strange, Chattanooga offensive lineman. Rugged football player. He's a people mover, really good range, unbelievable athlete. Has ability to play center as well, which we learned at the Senior Bowl. But I think he can be a year 2 starter for the Bills at guard. Number 70, Jeremy Ruckert, Ohio State tight end. I think he's a really underappreciated prospect because the receiving production wasn't there for him at Ohio State. But when you watch him play, you see route running, you see hands, you see a guy that gets after people as a blocker. I like Jeremy Ruckert a lot. I think he'd be a great 3rd-round pick. Kobe Bryant, Cincinnati cornerback. Think about a more athletic Levi Wallace. I think the Bills will like him a lot. I think he'd be a good 3rd-round pick that has immediate appeal to come in and challenge for a starting role, and maybe if you have him and Dane Jackson with a veteran, you have a chance there if Trey White has to miss some time. Number 72, Nick Cross, Maryland safety. Really aggressive player, unbelievable athlete. He's physical. He's got really good ball skills. Has to hone in on the instincts, mostly because I think he's a little too aggressive at times. And so I want him to be a little bit more sure in how he processes, but I like the way he plays. And if he gets the mental side down, I think he can be a really good starter in the NFL. Next up, Cade Otton, number 73. He's a tight end out of Washington. Really solid player across the board. Good route runner, good hands, and he is a willing blocker. Number 74, Nick Bonito, edge out of Oklahoma. I think he can be a linebacker, defensive end, hybrid type player, sort of like Lorenzo Alexander. He might be the best pure speed rusher in this class. And so if you just wanted that designated pass rusher to unload on long and late downs, this guy can really help you wreak havoc. Number 75, Nicholas Petit-Frere, offensive tackle out of Ohio State. I think he has some ability to play guard that makes him appealing. He's played both left and right tackle. And so I think as the Bills are looking for more versatility, depth, and developmental starters on the offensive line, Nicholas Petit-Frere offers that. Channing Tindall, number 76 out of Georgia, linebacker. You wish he had more game experience, but you cannot ignore the height, the weight, the speed, the physicality, and what he can do as a Sam linebacker in the Bills defense is interesting to me. 77, Brian Cook, Cincinnati, safety, rock solid player, versatile, can play man, can play deep alignments, can play some one high, be a plus special teamer and eventual starter if you were to move on from Jordan Poyer after the season. For 78, Logan Hall, defensive lineman out of Houston. He's a guy that has played all up and down the line of scrimmage for Houston, and I like that versatility. I don't think he's going to win much as an outside pass rusher, but I think you can unload him on interior gaps on long and late downs. He can play edge on running downs where he can set the edge, and he's got good length and good power at the point of attack. Number 79, Daniel Falel, Minnesota offensive tackle. He's massive. He's athletic. New to playing football. He came over from Australia, and so he's still kind of learning the game. I think that he's a guy that predictively, I don't think the Bills will draft him, but I thought he was worth putting in here just because he's got such a high ceiling to develop into as he learns the game, and he's massive and he's really athletic for a massive dude. And the number 80, DeMarvin Leal, Texas A&M, defensive lineman. Think about the things I just said about Logan Hall and apply them to DeMarvin Leal. So there you have it. 3 rounds full of players to give you the Bills-specific draft board. I'll put together a way for you to look at this on the internet. So I'll share this with everybody. I got to let the podcast run its course, and then sometime in the middle of the week, I'll let you guys have kind of like a list that you guys can reference and maybe have at your disposal for draft day, and use it to follow along as the Bills make their picks. I do want to mention those 3 players that I just couldn't fit them in here because I just don't think they fit what the Bills are doing, but I really like them, and they would probably slot somewhere second round, third round. Roger McCreary, corner out of Auburn. I think the NFL is going to look at him as a slot player. Jalen Petrie, safety out of Baylor. Again, I think he's a slot player. I think he's a nickel defender. I don't think he has much range and coverage. Good player, though. And then Cameron Thomas, edge out of San Diego State University. I think he's kind of a maxed out guy. I don't think the Bills need a player like him. He's likable. He was unblockable at San Diego State. But I worry about how his game translates to the next level. Good player. I just don't see the fit with the Bills. And then real quick, I do want to give you my quarterback rankings for this draft class. Malik Willis is my QB1 out of Liberty. Desmond Ridder, quarterback 2 out of Cincinnati. Kenny Pickett is number 3. Sam Howell, number 4. Matt Corral, number 5. And so I think those players will all be drafted in those first 80 picks. So you can really kind of look at it and say I stacked 85 players because the Bills aren't going to pick one of those quarterbacks, but it's worth at least mentioning. All right, folks, there you have it. The Bills-specific NFL draft board for the 2022 NFL draft, at least the way I see it. This is how I stack it up. And honestly, you peel the names off one at a time. The one that's highest, that's the one I'd pick. Hope you enjoyed. I love putting this together. This is definitely where my worlds collide, where my 2 passions, the Buffalo Bills and the NFL draft, meet, and I get to talk about both of those things. So I've really enjoyed our build up to the 2022 NFL draft, and we got more to do. We're still about a week and a half away, so we'll keep talking about it. We'll keep discussing the possibilities and make sure that you are ready for the draft. So make sure you're subscribed. Don't miss anything. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.